Alright, this is probably the latest I've ever been for a video. As you guys have seen, I've reviewed the Haolonggood grey Triceratops, but my Triceratops comparison wasn't as detailed as usual because my green Triceratops got separated and delayed in the post, so I couldn't compare them both. Also, since the huge horn suggests it might be a Yoshi-type Triceratops SP, some of you wondered if it's worth trading up from your EoFauna Yoshi. And since my own was repainted, I had to borrow another one so it's clearer for you to see. And some will probably also want a more detailed comparison to the PNSO, so I waited till everything was here to do this video. Now this probably won't help most of you now, since you've probably gone ahead to make your purchase, but I've decided to put this video up for the two of you who might still benefit. Before we look in close, I'm delighted to say that unlike in the previous offerings, the two variants aren't just the usual different color, same patterning scheme we've seen before. Indeed, this is how they started with the Triceratops, and it's one thing I was sorry to see let go. Of course, given how good Haolonggood's paint taps are, this photocopied patterning is still nothing to scoff at. But here in this flagship dinosaur, Haolonggood has really pulled out all the stops, making the green sufficiently different from the grey to give each its own individuality. The green variant is a lot more colourful and flamboyant, and with that comes a paint application that's more obvious and easy to appreciate. Now up close, I'll say again that Haolonggood has really upped their level here. Again, I'm almost tongue-tied as to where to begin first. The phrase "embarrassment of riches" keeps popping into my head when we look at the green. Starting at those unique horns, you'll see that really very good detail in the sculpt as well as the layers of application, which differs in style from the grey and gives me the feel of a more lacquered appearance. Compare that to the grey's speckled appearance here. The green's horns have a more veined appearance, and you can see that the veining appears to be beneath the surface, lending a living translucency. Now sure, there are some common motifs, such as the patterning in the squamosal, maxillary, and nasal areas, but in general, they are very different. The green is a beauty. Now see how buttery, smoothly the color blends are, going into the beige area of the nasal. We can admire the fineness of the scales, especially how naturally they flow into the bulge of the cheek skin here. Then here, gracing the scalation, is a beautiful, almost oily green, reminding me of some sideshow dinosaurs I have. I never imagined the day I'd see a sideshow level paint job on a mass-produced, reasonably priced model. And going down, we see the keratin in the beak and the nasal horn, which echo the style and color in the supraorbitals. We can see that the keratin in the beak and the nasal horn have distinct color application styles as well. If there's one thing to nitpick, is that the paint application or the epiossifications on the frill look really slack by comparison. And this was also the case in the grey, which because of the way the colour shows through, actually looks unfinished. And speaking of unfinished, the back of the frill in the grey looks like it could have been done with a couple more layers. The green looks more pleasing to me because of, once again, that buttery smooth blends of greens and yellows. And going into the body, we start at the neck, where the real exquisite beauty begins. Now look at the way these fine scales are formed. Their intricate nature can also be seen as we go down the arms, ending with those little scutes in the dorsal fingers I talked about in the grey. Now the scales are incredibly fine, and what's pleasing is how naturally they follow every curve and skin fold. In each variant, some details clearer to see in one compared to the other. Indeed, the hand is really a triumph, and those incredible dorsal scutes in the lateral fingers are often easier to see in the grey. Again, so wonderful to see the finely unclawed lateral unguals here. The colour transitions are incredible as well, and from the top you'll see an orange in the anterior half, fading to the green in the posterior half. In each area, these stripes and patterns have different tones, but are all naturally blended in. And from the side, you see the orange actually shifts forward, so it occurs only in the anterior-most part, while the majority is green, with some orange here in the thigh. And throughout all this, it's just fine scales, and fine scales all over. And even though in these skin patterns do I detect just the merest hints of squiggles, but even so, this is how it should be done, faded naturally into the surrounding skin when nothing feels slapped on. That interlocking skin mosaic, along with some of that nippling seen in Triceratops, are all demonstrated here. The detail is, of course, of the same meticulous standards, but you'll see that the colours are layered differently. And really, there's just so much colour complexity to this, it almost feels like a custom repaint. And just a quick comparison in the bodies with the grey, and I think you can see that actually, being grey and plain shows a clearer separation detail than the green, which surprised me. The colours they've chosen for this palette and the way they blend together so smoothly is simply a luscious triumph. Now just finishing off the rear, in the back, the thighs, the legs, and the words that keep coming to mind are exquisite detail and best exemplified in this view here, where you see all the fineness in these different areas. Now here's my almond again to help drive home the point. Now more conservatively painted doesn't mean lazily painted, and both truly feel premium, like they belong together. And with different patterns, you can really believe that these are two individuals, with perhaps even sexual dimorphism. I love the very dignified pose in this flagship dinosaur, and you can pose them in a variety of offset ways to create a very interesting diorama. Alright, since the Haolonggood looks like a Yoshi-type Triceratops, let's compare it to the EoFauna. Now this obviously shouldn't be a contest. It's 3 years apart, with technological and sculpting advancements, and EoFauna doesn't have the same economies of scale. So this is just really to help you make your decision if you're considering a new Yoshi-type Triceratops SP. Now let's get paint application out of the way. The EoFauna Trike has two variants. Now this one called the Cryptic, I have absolutely nothing good to say about, except to say it looks hideous. A fairer comparison would be this one, the Dominant, which has a more conservative colour palette. Now I normally wouldn't critique paint application for non-PNSO companies, which often look comparatively primitive, but I feel it's fair to comment here because this isn't the case where paint apps are bad throughout. You see some attempts at least to blend colours here and here, and at the distal points of the horns. Now they're not fantastic, but they still look quite good. So it's jarring to see that for some inexplicable reason, the application of these frill spots, the abrupt cuts in colour here, it's almost like those ancient ruins where construction stopped suddenly and mysteriously, whether it's because of war, famine, or ancient aliens. And when you consider how amazing EoFauna's Atlasaurus here is, or just look at the natural fade in the neck. The beautiful faint subcutaneous markings of the stripes. I mean, this wouldn't look out of place with some PNSOs. And the Triceratops is just quite discombobulating to look at. Next, we talk about accuracy. Now, the Yoshi-type brow horns are wonderfully and unapologetically captured, impressive in length and girth. Haolonggood here has more distinct epiossifications, while the rebor has them more resorbed into the frill margin, suggesting an older animal here. And for an actual Yoshi representative, including the shape of the frill, EoFauna is the droid you're looking for. We've seen already the Haolonggood prefrontal keratin here, which EoFauna doesn't have. The Haolonggood also has these weird agglomeration-like scales in the frill, which the EoFauna doesn't have. I actually prefer a flagship Triceratops without these speculative features. While I like the action-packed pose of EoFauna, it's got these spindly forearms, especially going into the wrist area. Haolonggood has the robust arms I'd expect to see. Integument-wise, both have generally polygonal scales we know of in Triceratops, and the nippling in the hip region. There's a maturity in Haolonggood's sculpting that comes only with many cycles of trying and retrying different designs and techniques, an advantage that EoFauna doesn't have. However, a plus point for EoFauna is in the ventral neck integument, which has been described as being rhombohedral. You clearly see that here, and not here in the Haolonggood, which doesn't agree with what we know. Taken piecemeal like this, the EoFauna comes out slightly ahead. And as for the detail, there's no doubt that Haolonggood is a lot more refined when it comes to the differentiated scales in different regions, as well as the skin folds and creases. Still, I think you can see that detail-wise, EoFauna does have some nice sculpting, particularly in the limbs. But you need only look at the differentiated scales in digits 4 and 5 to realize that Haolonggood is out of this world. Detail definitely goes to Haolonggood. Now the pose is an area where each has its plus points. The Haolonggood pose is dignified and majestic, and he has the right size bulk to pull that off too. But you can see that the EoFauna is a lot more action-packed, even to the point of having one foot off the ground. And that makes even more sense because EoFauna has intended for the possibility of combat if you got a second Triceratops. Now you see how they look together with the horns locked, jostling and pushing and shoving, trying to gain ground. This really is a big plus for EoFauna if you're looking for action. Now finally, we're going to talk not price but value. Now, with the price difference between EoFauna and Haolonggood as different as it was with the PNSO, then price alone could give you the swing vote. The PNSO is around $60 US, EoFauna is $30. That's double the price, but for many people, that price difference is just too great to justify. But here we have the Haolonggood, which is only $10 more than the EoFauna, being US $40. And for that price difference, I think many of us can avoid being cynics focused on the price of everything while minding the value of nothing. And for that $10 and the highly detailed fineness of sculpting in the Haolonggood, not to mention the gorgeous paint tabs and the larger size, I believe that for many of us, Haolonggood gives much better value and is the clear choice here. Now finally, some of you will want a detailed look between the Haolonggood and the PNSO, so we'll do that. Both have the kind of dignified pose that I'm increasingly fond of, with the Charles Arnott flavour of PNSO still very pleasing. The Haolonggood also looks very stately, and I think they really complement each other in terms of pose. And in terms of sculpted detail, you'll see each has its own aesthetics, so it comes down to personal preference. So I just need to give you a region-to-region comparison, and I think that will help you decide. I still really like the PNSO, but for most people trying to make a decision, I'd recommend the Haolonggood for the price and all the extra that price tag gives you. So that's it for Triceratops, hopefully for a while. Again, I wish this video was earlier, and hopefully it will still be useful to a couple of people out there. The rest, I'm sure, already have your Haolonggood Triceratopses well in hand, and I really hope that Haolonggood will give us the rest of the ceratopsians teased, and specifically, I'm excited to see how the Iosaurus and the Styracosaurus will look. I'll see you in the next video.